Stephen, there's just some questions here around how can teachers help students in their classroom? What, do you have some key tips? I mean, you're in a wonderful position being both an OT and a teacher.
I suppose it's kind of looking here and saying lots of tips. I suppose first and foremost, like as I said, these children are the experts, and it comes down to getting to know that child in your classroom. That often there can be a variety of needs, they're not just a physical need. There can be a sensory or a way they interpret their world through their senses aspects. There could be other needs involved. So I think like your first and foremost step, and I know it sounds like lip service, but in reality it is, you need to get to know the child first and foremost, know their needs. And then I suppose in Ireland, like I suppose looking around at different resources online and things like that, working towards, it's very hard to say straight off the bat, this will help for a child with dyspraxia. I think that's the whole point of this resource, that it's kind of your general aspects of learning and getting to know them. Thinking of, and I think really when you come back to it, it does come back to the fact of what the children said is appreciating them and understanding. And I don't want to be going off on one particular route. And again, that was their expertise, and anything I could add to that probably isn't fair on them today.
Absolutely. Another question that's come up a few times as well is when you are in a classroom with a child with dyspraxia DCD, do you think it's worth having that discussion with the broader student population in the classroom, obviously with the child's permission? Because we have some parents here saying that other students really don't understand what their child is going through, and that often ends up in maybe some bullying or the child becoming upset at times. So what would your advice in that situation be?
I suppose my advice would be generally the younger the better. That, like, you know, children that when they when very young children, 5, 6, 7, when they just hear about this thing, it's like, okay, yeah, this makes it a bit different, but he still plays with me in the yard, he's still just Johnny. It's like, so again, the younger the better. If you can have those conversations and explain, maybe he falls a bit more, you just need to mind him a bit better. And I suppose a good start would be talking to other parents about it and get it that way, because again, it's, if you're being, children don't want to be seen as different. So if you're having this conversation in a class and educating as a whole group, either that child either sitting there while you talk about them, or they're outside the room in getting resources and they're being talked about behind their back, which isn't necessarily the right way either. So I suppose it's kind of starting with the parents and other parents and working forward and see how that goes. And I suppose each case is different as well. Some children just don't want to accept their diagnosis, and that's entirely their decision. And maybe it's a case of they need to grow with that and get used to that. And some people just, and then some are very calm, and some people are very easygoing and are happy for that. And I suppose you need to just think about what would be your child's preference in that. How would they feel firstly if they were, if everyone saw them as different based on that label? Or is it a case of that they'd just be happy and they could take it in their stride and just be like, this is me, this is who I am? And then I suppose secondly, you're looking at the method in which you go about it. Is it a large group, or maybe is it a smaller group of just your, like the parents that they go to play dates or who they hang out with, would maybe be your starting block and work forward from there, because 5 people knowing is a lot easier to take for a child than 30 people knowing. And I suppose that would be my advice in that point.
That's really helpful. Thanks so much, Stephen. We have a more specific question here, and this is one for you to put the OT hat on with. Can you have a child with just poor fine motor skills and okay gross motor skills, or does it have to be both?
It doesn't have to be both, but like very frequently they come together. So for example, yeah, like a handwriting comes from, you see, everyone focuses on the small hand movements, your fingers, your hand grip, things like that. But in reality, it actually comes from upper body, your gross motor, your up shoulder strength. That's where all it goes proximal, which means closer to the body, and works its way out. So I suppose it is possible to have fine motor difficulties in isolation, but it'd be quite rare. Really, it generally comes from like often with children with dyspraxia, you see there's often maybe a core or a middle section weakness or something like that, and then maybe the upper body, upper limbs and things like that. So that would be my answer.
Great. Okay. And I'm going to confuse you now and ask you to put your teacher hat back on again, Stephen. So again, lots of questions coming in around how do parents communicate with schools? We know ourselves how difficult it can be to get awareness out there of what dyspraxia DCD is. And because it's so unique to each child, it's not as simple as going in and handing school a leaflet and saying, here you go, this is what it's all about. So for parents who are out there wanting to have that conversation with the school or with their child's teacher, do you have some tips for how they might approach that?
I suppose, like, my opinion always with working with parents or working with teachers, working with parents would always be that open and clear relationships are really important. So from a parent's point of view, I think regular communication, either every fortnight, every month, even if it's a 5-minute chat, is really beneficial, just because I always felt that the child at home versus the child at school, particularly in children with dyspraxia who are having to sit up straight, spending all their energy, are so fatigued at home, is totally different. And both sides don't necessarily see both sides of the coin from that point of view. So what you don't know, you can't help, is really important. So I think clear and open communication things are really important from the get-go. I suppose it's looking at in schools, like there's generally like for teachers in schools, there's normally you've got special education need teachers there, SEN teachers who would have maybe a stronger background in those areas, who could be a mentorship role for the teacher to go to and discuss. I suppose, again, don't catch the other person on the hop and meet them at the gate and say it. Have a meeting and just say, I'd just like to have a chat about that in advance. And I suppose anything else in relation to just keeping those open links, I suppose that would be my main advice, would be to keep the links open and to just use what resources are available, especially within the school. If as a teacher you don't know, I know myself, I wouldn't have known a massive amount until I went researching DCD and dyspraxia. So either there's great websites, both your own website in Dyspraxia Ireland, as well as there's other resources available as well.
Absolutely. We do find a lot of people contact us for information and resources. So yes,
yeah. And I must say as well that brilliant for getting back to people and emailing. In my experiences, anyone has had any issues have always come back and said that they were found. I know you've been ran ragged at times trying to get to them all, but in fairness to you.
Thanks, Stephen. That's much appreciated. Here's a more sensitive question that's come up from a number of parents. It's in relation to how they tell their child that their child has a diagnosis of dyspraxia DCD. Some parents are not sure how to raise the subject, and not sure whether the child is too young to understand, or should they leave it till later. So what advice would you have for parents in that situation, Stephen?
I suppose, as you said, it is a sensitive issue and it should be approached with sensitivity. I think, looking back, I think Noah would have given a brilliant explanation in his video, saying that you can do anything you want to do, it just might be a little bit harder. And I think that's the kind of attitude you'd be looking at, that it's not, as we said through the piece, it's not a barrier, it might be a little bit of an obstacle, but it's not going to be any different. And it says, in this case, I think when I worked with a lot of children with dyspraxia DCD, it was a case of, so a lot of them knew things they couldn't do. They knew that they weren't the best footballer. They said that they weren't a good artist. But when you challenge that, or you discuss what are you good at, and looked at that. So I suppose looking at things, maybe you have gotten this. The doctor said this, or whoever you met said this. But what difference does it make to who you are? You're still a really good reader. You still are brilliant for minding your pet dog. Like, again, a positive spin and a positive focus in discussions. It's like if they're diagnosed with dyspraxia at 5, 6 or 15, 16, it doesn't, like, they still lived with it to that stage, so it's not going to change the person they are. It probably, and again, looking at the positive, it probably just means that they'll get more help than what they thought they were getting it before. Even looking at, like, say, Chloe's point of view with the laptop made her life so much easier. Whereas if she hadn't got the diagnosis at the time, she wouldn't have got her laptop, and then she's there struggling writing. And again, it's just, I suppose, looking at the positives and emphasizing nothing's changing, we're just moving forward, and you can do anything as long as you try hard.
Well said, Stephen. And Chloe, you're an absolute testament to that as well. There's a question that's come in around allowing children in the classroom to have short breaks. So obviously concentration is very hard, sitting still sometimes is very hard. I also understand it from a teacher's point of view that they have lessons to get through, they have a class to keep under control. How do teachers balance that? Have you any tips for them?
Great question. I suppose first and foremost, I'd look at the resources available. So I know, like, you have PDST have a new resource for movement in the classroom, particularly linked with COVID. So it's kind of distance moving. And the Irish Heart Foundation have busy breaks that are a great idea. It's just kind of, again, they separate them. I haven't seen the newest, I haven't researched the newest updated ones, but the older ones were like cardio, they were stretches, and then they were relaxation ones. I think when you look at any type of busy break, or it doesn't necessarily have to be a movement break, they're kind of broken into three areas, which would be: one, your movement break; two would be your mental breaks, that's your mindfulness, meditation, breathing; and three would be your distraction. So it might just be a little crossword or an activity. But again, coming back to the movement break aspect, I think I always found when I was teaching that blending it into the curriculum was the best way to go. So like if it was tables, it's 3 times 3, 3, 6, 9, 3 jumping jacks, 3, 6, 9. If it was a case of doing your verbs in Irish, it was running as rit. So you were doing rit out of your place. Everyone's doing it. And once you kind of set up the, again, when you have 30 children doing it, it's not easy the first day. But once you set up ground rules and just make sure it's safe, no problems there. I think also, like, sometimes I suppose you're always worried about giving a child that you think is distractible the jobs, but it can be as simple as just saying, come here, will you go over and open that window for me? Get up out of the seat. No one's paying an underwiser. It's very inclusive in the class. It doesn't have to be the same child every time. But if you know that child, you're working with that child every day, you can see their triggers of when they're starting to get a small bit anxious, or if they're getting a small bit fidgety in their chair. I know one thing as well, fidgets, that it depends on where the line is. So there you can get all these fabulous fidgets. Don't go near fidget spinners. They're nothing. They don't help as much. They're just a gimmick. But there's fabulous ones. And my recommendations again would be, have a look on the special education websites and things like that, and then go and look for a cheaper alternative, Amazon, Wish, or any of those. And I suppose as well, I think it was one of the children said to me that when their teachers gave them blue tack. So blue tack's a thing that's in the classroom. It's in their hand. They can fidget with that. It's not a big flexible toy that looks silly. It's normal. Anyone could have it. And I think just looking at things like that, or even if it was just, I think just build it into your routine, build it into your curriculum, and just be inventive. Try it. If it doesn't work, so be it. It's 30 seconds. You didn't maximize. But if it does work, brilliant. You've got a new tool for the rest of the year.
Stephen, there's so many parents. I can almost hear the sighs out there saying, "Oh gosh, why can't we all have a Stephen in our classroom or our school?" They're absolutely wonderful tips. Really, really inclusive, and as you say, builds the support needs around the curriculum. It's wonderful. I just wanted to read something out here. There's a message from Yvonne who says, "The best communication I ever received about a student with dyspraxia was a letter written by the child's mother outlining how he learns. It personalized him and his learning style. Official reports can be too long and complex to read, especially as in most classes we have a number of children with SEN. One size definitely doesn't fit all." So
I think Yvonne's hitting the nail on the head there.
yeah, absolutely. And that ties in so much to your presentation, and Chloe and the other students who worked with you to put it together and to outline what they need, what their needs are, and how they'd like to work with their teachers in their schools.
100%. And I think it just basically said, I think Yvonne's right in the same track as us there, and saying that it's the experts are the children, their families. It's not necessarily the therapists or the teachers who are the experts in that child. I think that's fabulous. Thank you, Yvonne.
Absolutely. Just on a practical point here, a question: how do I approach the school about making an application for a laptop for my son who's in 6th class? I find it hard to discuss his needs without coming across as a pushy parent, because he performs well at school, and perhaps teachers don't understand how a DCD affects him on a daily basis.
I suppose, so with application for a laptop, it comes through that you need to go to either you have brilliant, but first step would be kind of getting the handwriting assessment from an occupational therapist, I suppose. and seeing, is there a need for it there at the start, and then maybe either potentially do some work with an OT on that, or if the OT thinks that that there is a need, they'll give a recommendation. And I suppose that can either come through, the early intervention team or the primary care team, or it can, and there's also the private route if that's not working for you. And I suppose my thing on handwriting, things like that, would be, your handwriting is a mode of expression, and obviously 99% of people need the functional writing, signing your name, writing a birthday card, but after that, it's a mode of expression. So if it's causing you torment in handwriting and taking ages or anything like that, and a laptop would be easier and more suitable, then that's the route to go. So once you have that recommendation letter from the occupational therapist, it's then a case of bringing it up with the school and the teacher, and then it'll come through the school, and I think you'll go through the principal to make that application for that laptop then.
Now, I'm conscious that we've nearly worn you out, Stephen, not long to go now. There's so many questions here. We're just not going to get through them all this evening, but what we'll try and do is perhaps put together a Q&A sheet that we can put up onto our website for parents and teachers to go in and have a look at. Stephen, this is, going back to the resource, it's such a wonderful thing to have, and something that yourself and Chloe and the other students are rightly proud of. How do we get the word out to schools, and how do we share this across other schools and get it in there to the teachers who are looking for it?
So I suppose the first steps I've made so far have been contacting the education centres, and it's been relatively positive. A number have gotten back, and I'll be emailing now tomorrow with the resource in the hope that they'll send it out. And a couple have already agreed, and hopefully tomorrow we'll get on when it's a physical resource sent to them as a link. And I suppose that's step one, education. So there's approximately 20-30 education centres around the country, where all teachers go for their training, but for some of their training for primary and secondary, and then they have mailing lists. And I suppose it's not necessarily a case of aiming to get it sent to every teacher, but if we can get it to every school and then circulate it around, it's a nice resource, it's colourful. I suppose that's step one. And step two is we'll be looking to apply for funding, see if we can get the physical resource, start sending it around to schools in that sense. And I suppose it's word of mouth. It's the same with everything. If you think this resource is fabulous, start saying it. Oh yeah. Next time you're talking to the teacher, if you are a teacher talking to the staff in the staff room saying, I was at this webinar, it was really good. If you're a parent, just mention it to your class teacher saying this was fabulous, or whatever you think. If you don't think it was fabulous, that's fine too. But just handing out the resource and getting it to them and then circulating it around. So like, I know I have contacted a number of schools of the children that were participants and sent it, and I know a number of teachers from those schools are here, and thank you very much for coming. And I suppose that's kind of the starting point, that like there are seven participants here who are now spokespeople for themselves if they want, and they've openly said that at the start now. And I suppose it's starting from there. And I suppose that's kind of where we start, get on the floor, get into those schools and work forward from there.
That's it. Yeah, and it's such a great turnout as well this evening. So thank you all for coming along and joining in. Really, really great resource. I think, Stephen, you've covered so much in such a short space of time, and I'm sure there's going to be a much greater appetite as we go along, and the resource is trialed out in schools and more teachers get on board. So we're definitely going to see you and hopefully Chloe back here again in the not too distant future. So I just want to say a huge thank you to you both again, and please pass on our thanks to all of the other students who are involved in the production of the resource as well. Is that okay?
Most definitely, and thank you, Sharon, and thanks to everyone, and thanks to everyone who turned up on their Monday evening. Much appreciated.
Thanks.